So this is the story of the Hunchback and the Swan, a story that I heard from Duncan Williamson, a wonderful Scottish traveller storyteller who is one of my mentors, my main mentor. There was once a baby born. He had beautiful blue eyes and chubby cheeks, but there was something wrong with his spine. There was a kink in his back. And as he grew from a baby to a toddler, they discovered that as well as having a hump on his back, he was also mute. He could see and he could hear and he could taste and he could touch, but he couldn't speak. When he went to school, the other children tried to play with him, but he never had anything to say. And when he walked down the street, the people would talk to him, but he would look up at them, those big blue eyes, and say nothing. And they started to wonder if his mind was as crooked as his back. And they would cross over the street so they didn't have to talk to him. But he did have friends, because every day at the end of school he would travel a well-worn path into the forest until he came to the place where the trees opened out and there was a lake. And he would sit down and he would take out the lunch that he had saved. And there would be a rustling to one side of him, and there'd be a black nose and a red face, and out would come fox. And from the other side, lolloping, would come rabbit. And then there would be a fluttering in the air, and all the birds of the forest would come down, the wrens and the jays and the blackbirds. They would gather on his shoulders, they would come and eat from his hand. And then all the little creatures, the moles and the voles and the shrews, even the fish would jump in the lake. All the animals of the forest would come and gather around him, and he would share his little bit of food. All the animals except one. Because out on the lake, for him the most beautiful of all the creatures of the forest, glided back and forward. Swan. Her long neck, her white feathers gathered behind her. And he would throw out breadcrumbs to her, and she might take the first, she might even take the second, but then she would glide away. And the Hunchback would sit there, all the other animals forgotten, just gazing after the Swan. Well, the years rolled by and the Hunchback grew up, and he moved from the town into the forest. He built himself a hut and he made a living collecting all the dead wood, the branches and twigs from underneath the trees, and he would put them on his back, he would take them into the town and he would sell them. And he wouldn't make a lot, but he'd make enough to keep body and soul together, enough to buy a little bit of food, and he would come back at the end of the day, travelling that well-worn path, to sit each evening by the lake and share his food. And always his eyes were drawn to the Swan, gliding back and forward, but she never would come any closer. Until one day, all the animals gathered at twilight, as they did every day, and the Hunchback didn't come. A second evening, once again the animals gathered, once again the Hunchback didn't come. A third evening, and the animals started to ask each other, have you seen him? Have you seen him? Has anybody seen him? Has anybody heard him walking beneath the branches? Anybody seen him beneath the trees? Nobody had. And so all the animals, they gathered together, they went to see the wisest of all the creatures in the wood, which of course is the owl. And they called up, Owl! Hey, Owl! An owl came out blinking and bleary on her branch. What is it? It's the Hunchback. We're worried. We're worried in case he's ill or sick. Oh, the Hunchback. He is sick. He's love sick. He's only gone and fallen in love with Swan, and she won't have anything to do with him, but that's the only thing that can cure him. And so all the animals, they made their way back to the lake, and they sent Swallow dipping and diving over the waters to tell Swan what Owl had said. And when Swan heard that, something inside her changed. She'd always been too shy, not known how to join the others, but now her strong legs began to swim, paddle beneath the water. She made her way to the edge of the lake. She pulled herself up out of the water, and not so graceful on land as she was on the water, she began to waddle. And she waddled her way through the trees till she came to the Hunchback's hut. She tapped on the door opened and shut behind her. All the other animals gathered, waiting outside to see what would happen. Robin flew up onto the sill to peer in, to see what was happening. There lay the Hunchback, pale, grey, his eyes closed, his chest barely breathing as he moved. In came the swan. She came over to his bed and she stretched out that long neck and she lay it on the hunchback's chest. His eyes snapped open and he looked down and he went to stroke her head, but already she'd taken her head back and she plucked one white feather from her breast. She lay it on the hunchback's chest and it seemed to take root and to grow. Another and another and another until his front was covered in feathers. He sat up in the bed and that hump on his back cracked and out of it came two beautiful white wings. "What's happening? What's happening?" cried all the animals. And the robin, he turned and he tried to tell them, but a lump caught in his throat. All he could do was twitter and tweet. It's all he's been able to do ever since. But a moment later, out came not one, but two white, mute swans. And together they waddled their way down the path to the lake. And from then on, there was always not one, but two swans sailing on the waters.